Hello students, welcome to Shubhra Ranjan IAS. As a part of our test series, we were discussing the test number 25. This test number 25 is a full-length test of economy. As usual, our approach will be that we'll look at the questions, we'll look at the statements, then we'll quickly discuss the concept which is there behind the question, then solve the question. Let us begin with question number 1. Which of the following statements best describe the reason behind creating the capital conservation buffer? Statement 1. To maintain a minimum of 8% capital adequacy ratio. 2. To increase the lending during the periods of economic stress. Build up capital buffers during the normal times, which can be used during the stress period. And 4. Have a 2.5 percentage of buffer for their risk-weighted assets in the form of deposits. Now, what is the capital conservation buffer? Why do we need it? As per the Basel framework, the banks have been prescribed to maintain a minimum of 8% capital adequacy ratio. This 8% is a percentage of the risk-weighted assets. So it is the ratio of capital to the risk-weighted assets. So now the capital conservation buffer is a buffer amount, additional capital, which you maintain over and beyond the normal capital adequacy ratios amount. And why do you need it? Think of it in this way. During good times, you are saving some money so that during the bad times, you can use those savings. You can tap into those savings and you can use that amount. The CCB is also maintained for a similar purpose so that during the good times, the bank will put aside some amount. During the economic stress, during the financially stressful times, the banks can use this additional capital to meet its needs. Now let us look at the statements. To maintain a minimum of 8% of capital adequacy ratio at all the times. That is not the main purpose of the CCB. This is prescribed as per the Basel framework, but the CCB is to have additional protection, additional funds over and beyond the capital adequacy ratio funds. So this is incorrect. To increase their lending during the periods of economic stress. The purpose is to, like I said, to save during the good times so that you can use and tap into that amount during the bad times. It is not to increase the lending during the period of economic stress. So this is also incorrect. Statement 3. Build up capital buffer during the normal times, which can be used during the stress period. So this is syncing with our logic to save during the good times, to keep aside, and then using during the stress period. So this is correct. Have a 2.5 percentage of buffer of the risk weighted assets in the form of deposits. So the main catchword here is deposits. It's not having in the form of deposits. We are putting aside certain part of our capital. Deposit is the liability to the bank. So, but here we are putting it in the form of the capital and not taking in the form of the deposits. So this is not deposit. So this is also incorrect. How many of the above statements are incorrect? So you have to be careful whether the question is asking about correct or incorrect statements. So 1, 2, 3. 3 statements are incorrect. So for question number 1, answer is option number C. Let us move on to question number 2. Consider the following statements and sustainable development. Based on the global indicator framework and data produced by the national statistical systems and the information collected at the regional level, the United Nations Secretary General presents an annual sustainable development report. The UN Secretary General presents an annual sustainable report about the Sustainable Development Goals, also known as SDG report, based on the various information which they have collected from the national statistical systems and the regional level information. So this statement is indeed correct. Now, The Global Sustainable Development Report is produced to inform the quadrennial Sustainable Development Goal Review deliberations at the UN General Assembly once every quarter. So the second statement is saying that the Global Sustainable Development Report is produced to inform the quadrennial, that means every 4 years once, Development Goal reviews. And again, they are contradicting it by saying it not once every quarter. So it cannot be 4 year once and again every quarter once. So this statement is wrong because the Global Sustainable Development Report, also known as GSDR, it is produced every 4 years once and not every quarter. And why is this done? It is done to inform about the Sustainable Development Goal reviews. So this objective is correctly mentioned, but the period is wrongly mentioned. Hence, this statement is incorrect. It is not every quarter. Select the correct answers. The correct answer is only one. Coming to question number 3. Which of the following best describes the dynamic scoring often used in the fiscal policy analysis? There are two different ways of or two different perspectives of analyzing the fiscal policy. One is the dynamic scoring and another approach or another perspective is the static scoring. When we say dynamic scoring, it will try to look into the long-term impacts of the fiscal policy. It will see how the individuals or the businesses or the economy will react to the policy changes, and it will include the feedbacks from the economy. For example, if I say, if I come up with a tax reform, what will be the impact of this tax reform, which is part of the fiscal policy, on the overall economy in the long term? How will it impact the individuals? How will it impact the businesses? How will it impact the overall economy in the long term? So if we consider all the repercussions of a particular policy in the long term, that is known as dynamic scoring. Because as you can see here, the impact of the tax reforms will be in the future and it will have long-term repercussions, and the impact will be felt very dynamically, and it is not like one-time impact. But on the opposite side, when we look at the fiscal policy from the static lens, it will just study the immediate impact. Here if you go for long-term impact, here it is just the immediate impact. And what will be the immediate impact? Here we were studying the impact on the individuals, the business, the economy, the macroeconomy. But here if we'll just study it on what will be the impact on the revenue, what will be the impact on the expenditure and all of this. And this will ignore the feedback from the economy. And to take an example for here, for example, if we take here we took the tax reform example. Here if we see that if we increase tax, how much additional revenue we will get. So this is very basic direct linkage, right? But if you see here, it will have multiple repercussion long-term impact. But here I can directly calculate it, see it one time. So it is showing the impact on the revenue or the expenditure. So it is very immediate in nature. That is the difference between dynamic scoring and static scoring, the way we look at the fiscal policy analysis, two different approaches. Let's come back to the question number 3. Now the question says, which of the following is best describes the concept of dynamic scoring? We are talking about this concept. It is a methodology that only considers the immediate impact of the policy changes on the government revenue and expenditure. We just studied that static scoring is what will study the immediate impact on the government policy, government revenue and the expenditure. So this is incorrect. They have given the definition of static scoring. An approach that takes into account the broader and long-term effects of a fiscal policy on the various aspects of the economy. We saw they'll consider the long-term impact and how it will impact the individuals, businesses, economy in the long term. So this seems to be correct. Let us keep it on hold. C. A technique that disregards the ripple effect of policy changes over time. In dynamic scoring, we would want to consider the repercussion on the ripple impacts. So this is incorrect. A tool that overlooks the dynamic interaction and feedback loops within the economy. We saw that in the dynamic scoring, we will consider the feedbacks from the economy, whereas in the static, we will ignore it. So this is also incorrect. So basically, they have tried to combine our definition from the dynamic scoring, then different definitions and characteristics of the static scoring so that you can be confused. So the correct option which is talking about the dynamic scoring here is only option number B. Let us move on to the next question. Question number 4. Sustainable development is well important for the being of human society. I think there is some mistake in phrasing. Sustainable development is important for the well-being of human society. So this is the assertion, and this seems like a common sense. Sustainable development is important for the well-being of human society. Let us see the reason. Sustainable development is a kind of development that meets the needs of the present generation without compromising the ability of the future generation to meet their own needs. So this is talking about the concept of sustainable development. If we try to exploit all the resources now and the present generation enjoys it, there will be nothing left to the future generations, whether in terms of resources or they will be left with lot of pollution. But the Brundtland Commission in 1987, they came up with the concept of sustainable development. So what does sustainable development says? It is about balancing the needs of the present generation and also future generation, such that the present generation should not sacrifice too much on their needs. At the same time, they should also keep in the mind the needs of the future generation. So it says that to meet the needs of the present generation without sacrificing the ability of the future generations to meet their own needs, so that there will be something left for them also. When we go away, this generation goes away, we leave a better earth, better resources for our future generations. So that is the concept of sustainable development. So is sustainable development important for the well-being of human society? Definitely, this is correct. And they have given the definition of sustainable development here. So this is also correct. And this is the reason for this assertion. So our option will be both A and B are true. The assertion and reason are true. And the reason is the correct explanation of the assertion. So it will be option number A. This question is asking about the definition of sustainable development. Let us move on to the next question. What is the main purpose of the minimum reserve system followed by the Reserve Bank of India? Now, what is minimum reserve system? India currently follows the minimum reserve system when it wants to issue the cash. Earlier, before the minimum reserve system, until the 1956, we used to follow something called as proportional reserve system, wherein if the RBI wants to issue the currency to the people, issue the currency in the economy, it had to keep a certain proportion of that issue amount in the form of gold and foreign exchange reserves. Now, as the economy started growing, this became a problem. Assume that we have to come up with 100 billion crores of issue. In reality, that much won't happen, but assume. So now, in order to keep that much gold and foreign exchange reserve, where will the RBI get the gold and foreign exchange reserve? So it will be difficult. So the government and RBI decided to move from the proportional reserve system to the minimum reserve system, wherein now the RBI will have certain minimum amount kept in its coffer and it can issue unlimited currency technically. And this minimum amount will be around 200 crores, and approximately 115 crore will be in the form of gold and the remaining will be in the form of foreign currency. So now RBI can have this much minimum reserve within itself, and it can go for issue of currency. Now, why should RBI have this? What is the reason of having this minimum reserve system? Remember, RBI promises that I'll pay the bearer a sum of so and so rupee, and RBI is promising on behalf of the government to promise to pay the bearer of the money, the currency note. So, in order to do that, the RBI should have some backing, right? So, that backing is this reserve which RBI maintains. But even though technically RBI can go for the unlimited issue of currency notes, it will not go because unlimited currency printing of currency note will lead to inflation, and if there is no real increase in the economy, if there is no equivalent production, it will lead to too much inflation in the economy. So RBI will try to balance all of this and print only as much as currency note as is required by the economy. Now that we have understood the concept of minimum reserve system, let us look at the statements. It is to ensure that the government has enough foreign reserves. Is it? The minimum reserve system doesn't bother about the foreign reserves. The foreign reserves will be gained by the government when we are doing the trade. The main purpose of the minimum reserve system is when we are issuing the money, you need to have some reserve, the backing for the money. That is the main basic purpose of minimum reserve system. So this is wrong. To prevent the inflation and stabilize the economy. Is this the purpose? No. To expand the money supply to meet the needs of the increasing transactions of the economy. So this talks about the issue of currency notes and the backing behind it. So this seems to be correct. Let us keep it on hold. To control the value of the Indian rupee in the international market, the RBI will go for various other measures to control the exchange rate of rupee, but not the minimum reserve system. The purpose is different. So this is also incorrect. So correct answer for question number 5 is option number C. Let's move on to question number 6. What is the key difference between the Leeds Perception Survey and the Logistics Performance Index of the World Bank? Now, both the surveys are related to the logistical sector. The logistical sector serves the supply chain. So, firstly, we'll look at the leads. The full form of the leads is logistics is across different states. So, this was launched by the Indian government to study the logistics sector within the country. And there is a logistical measure at the international level, and that was launched by the World Bank, and that is the Logistical Performance Index. So, in the Logistical Performance Index, what happens? They'll just go to the people who are involved in the logistical sector, like the managers, and then they ask about their perception. What do you think of the logistical sector? Is it going to increase? Is it going to decrease? Is it robust? Do you face any problems in the sector? What do you think the sector will be in the future years? And all that will be considered. Only the perceptions will be taken, or the opinions will be taken from the people. This is the World Bank report. But when India adopted this report to India, we not only went for the perceptions, along with the perception, we also have some objective criteria. So that way, we just don't want opinions. There should also be some data which is backing the opinions. We have the opinions and we have the data, then we come up with a report. That report is much better than just having perceptions, right? Now let us look at the statements. The leads focuses on states while the LPI focuses on the countries. Is this the key difference? No. Leads is entirely based on perception based survey while LPI is not. LPI incorporates both perception and objectivity while the leads relies only on perception. Here they are saying that LPI incorporates both perception and objectivity. So they are in fact saying the opposite of what we discussed. So that is also wrong. Then finally they are saying leads incorporates both the perception as well as objectivity, while the LPI, Logistical Performance Index launched by the World Bank, it relies based only on the surveys. So this is the correct answer, wherein The LPI of World Bank is just based on the perception, but the government's performance index, the leads index, that is based both on the perception and we also have a objective criteria. Let's move on to question number 7. With reference to the marketable securities, consider the following statements. Marketable securities include government securities like the government securities and the treasury bills. So in the marketable securities, the government securities and the treasury bills which are issued by the central governments and state governments, all these will be included. Okay, we have to see which of the following statements are correct. So this is definitely correct. Statement number 2. These securities are often preferred for short-term investment strategies due to their high liquidity. The short-term securities in terms signify that they are highly liquid. So this is also correct. They have a high marketable value and are subject to fluctuations based on the trading market demand. So because they will be traded in the secondary market, their value will be fluctuating based on the demand and supply. So this is also correct. Which of the following statements are correct? All the 3 statements are correct regarding question number 7. Next, question number 8. With reference to the MSME sector contribution, consider the following statements. Under the Atmanirbhar Bharat Abhiyan, MSME sectors are classified based on the investment and turnover. Statement 2. A lower capital output ratio in the MSME indicates a high level of investment needed for the growth. Now, under the Atmanirbhar Bharat program, indeed the government tried to change the definitions of the MSME. So earlier we used to divide the MSMEs into micro, small, medium, and we used to have a separate definition for the manufacturing and separate definition for the service sector. So we used to say, for example, anything investment below 25 lakh for the manufacturing sector, or if it is the service sector, then the investment below 10 lakh that will fall under the micro category. Then for small it used to be 5 crore, for medium it used to be 10 crore. So for manufacturing it used to be separate, for service sector it used to be separate. Now the government came up with a new criteria, as in they merged both the manufacturing and the service sector, and they came up with the investment and turnover criteria. Now after the revised definition of the MSMEs, to call a micro MSME, the investment has to be less than 1 CR and the turnover has to be less than 5 crores. Similarly, we have a different definition for small. Similarly, we have a different definition for the medium industry. So the question is saying under Atmanirbhar Bharat, MSMEs are classified based on the investment and turnover. So like I said, we have both the investment and turnover criteria now. This is correct. And you should also note that earlier the manufacturing and service sector, they used to have the different criteria for the investment. Now both manufacturing and service have been merged together in the classification. Statement number 2. A lower capital output ratio in the MSME indicates a high level of investment needed for the growth. Now what is capital by output ratio? It shows that what is the level of capital needed to produce the output. So this shows the efficiency in the usage of the capital. So we should be using the capital efficiently or inefficiently. Tell me. Definitely we should use the capital efficiently. So we should use as less as capital possible so that we can produce the same output. That is when we are efficient. We are using less capital to produce the same output. So the lower the ratio is, the better it is, because it shows the high efficiency in the sector. But what the statement is saying, the statement is saying that a lower ratio will show that we will need high investment. So that is opposite of the definition given in the capital output ratio. So this is incorrect. In fact, a lower ratio will show the higher efficiency, and if you are using the capital efficiently, We don't need higher capital because we are already using the capital which we have efficiently. So this is why the second statement is incorrect. So for question number 8, which of the following statements are correct? It is only one which is correct. So A is the correct answer. Question number 9. With reference to the income method of GDP calculation, consider the following statements. We have to choose the correct statements. So as per the income approach of GDP calculation, the income method sums up the compensation to employees, taxes on production and imports, and gross operating surplus. This approach includes the sum of all producers' income. Interest, rent, and profits are part of the income approach of GDP. Now, there are different approaches to calculate GDP. One is the expenditure method, one is the income approach, and the other one is the value addition approach. So, in the income approach, what we'll do? There are factors of production like the land, labor, capital, entrepreneurship, and there is factor income. So we will consider each of these factor income. For example, we have profit for entrepreneurship, then we have rent for the land, then we have interest for the capital. So we will consider all of this income, and sum of all of this income for the factor incomes is the income as per the income approach. Now the question is saying that the income method sums up the compensation to employees, the taxes on production and the import, and the gross operating surplus. So this is correct. When we say compensation to employee, it is considering the compensation given to the labor, then taxes on production and imports. Taxes on production will become part of the price of the good, and ultimately it will be reflected when the taxes go to the government. So that also will be showing the net output of the GDP. So that is also correct. And the gross operating surplus. The gross operating surplus is the company's point of view, wherein after removing the basic expenses, operating expenses, whatever the operating profit which they get, that is the gross operating surplus. So all of this is correct. This approach includes the sum of all producer income. So this approach, like I said, these are the incomes, these are the factors of productions. Whatever the incomes the factors get, that is being included. So this is also correct. Interest, rent, and profit are part of the income approach to GDP. We discussed of interest, rent, and profit are part of the income approach of GDP. So this is also correct. The question is asking which of the following statements are correct. All three are correct. So our answer will be option C, all three. Let's move on to the next question. With reference to the Financial Stability Board, consider the following statements. The Financial Stability Board operates as an international body that provides a platform for national authorities, international standard setting bodies, and the international financial institution to enhance the global financial stability. The very purpose of Financial Stability Board is to enhance the global financial stability. And the other function being it will give warning about the systematic risks which are there in the global economy. It will promote the implementation of G20 financially regulatory reforms. It will monitor the global financial system and it will make recommendations to the about the global financial systems. Then statement 2, the Financial Stability Board collaborates with the IMF to conduct the early warning exercises aiming to identify and address the systematic risk of the global financial systems. So this is also true. The policy measures and standards set by the FSB, the Financial Stability Boards, are legally binding on its member countries, ensuring the compliance. Whatever are the suggestions given by the FSB, they are just recommendatory in nature and they are not legally binding. So this option is incorrect. Which of the following statements are correct? Only 1 and 2 are correct, 3 is incorrect. So correct option is B, only 2. With reference to the income approach to human development, consider the following statements. The income approach equates the higher income levels with greater human development. According to this approach, income is the sole determinant of an individual's freedom. This approach is widely accepted as the most comprehensive measure of human development. How many of the above statements are correct? So for development, we can look at the development from different approaches. So one is the income approach, then we have the capability approach. So the income approach says that if you increase the income of a person, he will get more access to purchasing power. If he can get access to purchasing power, he can procure himself the goods and services. For example, he can give himself good education, he can afford the good healthcare. So that way, ultimately, the good income will lead to the overall development of a person. Whereas the capability approach will say that you try to increase the capabilities of a person. Here they will look at the broader dimensions. You need to increase the opportunities, capabilities of a person, and not just the income. We should go beyond the income and increase the capability of a person. Only then the person will be able to develop in life properly. And this capability approach was propounded by economist Amartya Sen. Now look at this statement. The income approach equates higher income levels with greater human development. So that is what is the assumption of income approach, that if a person get more income, he'll be having better access to the resources like education and health, so he can afford them, and ultimately it will lead to his development. So that is the assumption of this income approach. So that is correct. According to this approach, income is the sole determinant of the individual's freedom. Our individual's freedom or development, will it be dependent just on the income? Will having just the income be enough? What if he doesn't study well, even if they have the income? What is if health is not good? What if the political freedom is not there? What is the society is not conducive for his living, even though he has good income? So income is the main criteria, but it is not the sole criteria. There are also other factors which are playing role in the development of a person. So by that logic, this becomes incorrect. This approach is widely accepted as the most comprehensive measure of human development. This is not the most comprehensive measure of the human development. There are various other approaches. This is often criticized because of its narrow focus only on the income. But the other approaches like the capability approach, like developed by the Amartya Sen, they go beyond the income. Then they try to increase the capabilities of a person, which are much more than just having the income. So this is also incorrect. The question was asking how many of the statements were correct. Only statement 1 was correct, so only one statement is correct. Coming to question number 12. Consider the following statements regarding the International Monetary Fund. The IMF focuses on the reducing poverty and increasing shared prosperity in the developing countries. Joining IMF is a prerequisite for a country to become eligible to join the World Bank Group. The IMF provides extensive financing and technical assistance to strengthen the private sector in its member countries. How many of the above statements are correct? So this question is asking about the objectives of IMF. What is the main purpose of IMF? The main purpose of IMF is to maintain the global economic stability, to deal with the macroeconomic issues at the global level, to deal with the financial system and its stability. So the statement 1 says IMF's primary focus is reducing poverty and increasing the shared prosperity. Even though ultimately having a better financial system will lead to reduction in poverty and increasing prosperity, all of that, is it the basic purpose of IMF? No, this is not the basic purpose of IMF. The basic purpose of IMF is to maintain the stability of the financial system at the global level. But this developing nations and reducing poverty and increasing the prosperity. All these are the main basic objectives of the World Bank. Joining the IMF is a prerequisite for a country to become eligible to join the World Bank group. So there is this condition given by the World Bank group that before you want to join the World Bank group, you have to join the IMF as a member. So this condition is correct. Statement number 3. The IMF provides extensive financing and technical assistance to strengthen the private sector in its member country. In order to strengthen the private sector in the member countries, there is the International Finance Corporation under the World Bank Group, which will focus mainly the strengthening of the private sector in the member countries. So this is not the basic objective of IMF. So this is also incorrect. How many statements are correct? Only one is correct. So only one. A is the correct answer for question number 12. Question number 13. Consider the following statements with respect to fiscal asymmetry in the Indian federalism. Statement number 1. Fiscal asymmetry refers to the unequal financial powers and resources among the federal units. Now, what is fiscal asymmetry? Fiscal means relating to the government. Asymmetry is something is not symmetrical, something is not same. So, asymmetry is difference. So, fiscal asymmetry shows the differences in the financial positions of the governments. So here we are talking in the context of Indian federalism. So it is the differences in the financial position or the financial capacities of the different state governments in India. So statement 1 says fiscal asymmetry refers to the unequal financial powers and resources among the federal unit, nothing but the states. So yes, that is the meaning of fiscal asymmetry. The Finance Commission's recommendations lead to fiscal asymmetry through varied fund allocation. So the statement is saying that when the Finance Commission does the vertical devolution of funds to the states, it will lead to fiscal asymmetry because of the varied fund allocation. So we know that the Finance Commission will have a different criteria, the income criteria, the population criteria, the forest criteria. So all of that will be given certain weightage, and we know that each state will not get the same funds. Even though different states pay different amount of taxes, the amount of funds that they get back is not the same. It will be based on the criteria decided by the Finance Commission, the formula of the Finance Commission. So by getting the different amounts, will the asymmetry or the differences in the financial position of the states increase or decrease? Definitely, it will lead to changes because each state will get a different amount. So this is also correct. And the third statement is saying central sector schemes contribute to fiscal symmetry by providing equal fund to all the states. So you have to be very careful. Here suddenly they were talking about asymmetry, and when it came to the third statement, they are talking about fiscal symmetry. They are saying central sector schemes contribute to fiscal symmetry or having the same financial position of the same by providing equal fund to all the states. Now, what are central sector schemes? Central sector schemes are the programs which are funded and implemented by the government, whether it can be about health, education, agriculture, infrastructure. The amount of funds given by the center to the states won't be equal. It will be based on particular criteria. For example, say, let us take one example of the PM Kisan scheme. So the 6,000 rupees which the central government give to the farmer, will the central government allocate the amount based on the state, or it will go based on the individual number of farmers in the state? A particular state having more number of farmers will get more amount. A state having less number of farmers who are qualified for the scheme will get less amount. Are all the states getting equal funds here? No. In this case, it is dependent on the number of farmers in the state. Similarly, they can have different criteria like the need or demand of the state, the population size, and other performance based metrics. So the third statement is incorrect. The question is asking us how many of the above statements are correct. Statement 1 was correct, statement 2 was correct. So only two statements are correct for question number 13. Next, question number 14. In the context of a startup, which type of investor is more likely to provide not just financial support but also technical or managerial expertise? So when we have a startup, we'll be going for the various funding needs and there will be different types of investors who will give money to the startups. So the one type of investors who initially invest into the idea of the startup and try to promote the startup in the early stages, they are known as angel investors because generally they'll be an individual person and they come like an angel to help you start your business. So that is angel investors. Now, will the angel investor give any technical or managerial expertise? No, he'll just give you the funds. But after that, there comes the role of venture capitalists. Venture capitalists try to give you funds, and at the same time, they'll have some technical and managerial expertise. So they will try to give you that also. So for this question, venture capitalist is the correct answer because venture capitalists not only give you the funds, but they also sometimes try to provide you the technical expertise, the managerial expertise. They'll try to give their experience on that particular sector and how to manage your business and how to go about what should be the future plan of action. And they might even help you get some high level managers from different companies and appoint in your startup. So all this help, business related help also will be sometimes provided by the venture capitalists, which the angel investors don't do. Angel investors mainly focus on the giving the funds. The venture capitalists along with the funds go for technical and managerial expertise and suggestions. Question number 15. In the context of macroeconomics, the marginal propensity to consume reflects which of the following ideas? Now, in macroeconomics, what is the marginal propensity to consume? The marginal means always remember in economics change of something, propensity to consume, motivation to consume, or how much will be the increase in consumption. So, when we say marginal propensity to consume, we are discussing about what is the change in the consumption due to a change in the income. So we use the formula of change in consumption for the change in income. Here y is the change in income, delta y is change in income and delta c is change in consumption. So when we say marginal propensity to consume, we measure what is the change in the consumption of a person due to the changes in the income. And marginal propensity to save is how much of the proportion of a person is being saved. And income can only have two components. If you get 100 rupees, you can either spend that money called the consumption or you can use part of it for savings. So the net sum of this, both of this should come to one because the amount, whatever you have consumed, remaining amount will be saved. If you put more for savings, then you'll have less for consumption. So ultimately, the total sum will be 100 in the case of our example. So remember, marginal propensity to consume plus marginal propensity to save will be equal to 1. Now the question is asking us, what is marginal propensity to consume here? So option 1 says it is the proportion of additional income that is spent on the consumption. It is directly syncing with our formula. It is the proportion of additional income that is spent on the consumption. So this is correct. Let us keep it on hold. The proportion of additional income that is saved. I just told about the marginal propensity to save. So this option is talking about marginal propensity to save. The proportion of total income that is spent on the consumption. When we say the proportion of total income that is spent on consumption, it is known as the average propensity to consume. the proportion of total income that is saved. Again, when we talk about the proportion of total income, then it is the average propensity to save. So correct answer which is reflecting the MPC is option A for question number 15. So question number 16. Which country announced its withdrawal from the OPEC, Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, in 2023 due to a disagreement over the oil production quotas? Now, what is OPEC? OPEC is the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries. So basically, who are all the major petrol exporting countries in the world? They have all formed an organization for themselves, and this organization is known as OPEC. It is a cartel of the oil producing companies. It was founded in 1960, and the headquarters of this OPEC is in Vienna, Austria. And what is the main objective of OPEC? In order to coordinate among the members by having the production limitations and control the supply of oil that they are producing, so that ultimately they can control the oil prices. Remember here, if someone says OPEC is controlling the oil prices, it is wrong. OPEC will control how much each of the country will produce. So they will have quotas for the member countries. So they'll say you can produce this many barrels of oil. You can produce this many barrels of oil. So that way they'll put quotas and production quotas for the members, because if production is controlled, supply will be controlled. If supply will be controlled, automatically it will have an impact on prices, because if the supply falls when there is demand, the price will automatically increase. And if the supply will keep increasing, even though there is no demand, the price will keep falling. So supply has impact on the prices. So OPEC doesn't control the price, but OPEC will control the production and supply, so that indirectly the prices will be ultimately reflected in the market. And the prices as usual are controlled by the demand and supply. And previously in 2023, what had happened? The OPEC put a condition on Angola saying that you can only produce this much of oil, but Angola wanted to produce more. So whatever was the oil production quota, like I explained here, that each of them will be given particular quota of production. They can only produce that much, so that the production and the supply in the market can be controlled. Angola wanted to produce more. Because of that, they had a disagreement with the OPEC members, and Angola left the OPEC grouping. So the correct answer is Angola for question number 16. And few of the other countries which left the OPEC previously are Qatar. Qatar left OPEC in 2019. Indonesia left little before that. Ecuador left little before that. So in the past, what has happened? Few of the countries have left OPEC and joined OPEC. In the recent past, Qatar, Indonesia, and very recently Angola have left the OPEC grouping. Question number 17. Which of the following best describes the concept of built-in inflation? When we say built-in inflation, the inflation is not happening due to some external factor, but it is happening because of the internal factors or the inbuilt nature of the functioning of the economy. So let us look at the options here. Inflation resulting from the changes in the government policy. So if the inflation in the economy will change because of the government factory, that will be the external factor. Inflation driven by the speculative activities, that is also not right. Inflation resulting from the automatic increase in the wages and prices. So this is the inbuilt factor. I'll explain how. Say for example, the prices of goods and services in the market increase. That is, the inflation is high in the economy. Now in order to meet the high cost of living, what will the workers do? The workers will demand more wages. Now the producer has to listen to the workers and give them more wages, because otherwise the workers will keep revolting. If the workers DA will be increased, dearness allowance will be increased so that the cost of living can be maintained. The wages will increase because there was some inflation, and because of the workers' demand to maintain the same cost of standard of living, the workers' wages was increased. So when the workers' wages increased, ultimately it will lead to higher production cost. So if cost will become higher, what will the producer will do? He'll increase the price of the good. So what is happening now? Again, this is leading to inflation. So the increase in wage is leading to higher cost. The higher cost is leading to higher price. And because the higher price is there in the market, the workers won't be able to afford the good again. So again, they'll demand for more wages. So this is like a cyclical thing happening. And this is happening because of the inbuilt features on how the economy works. So this statement C, which reflects the increase in the wages and prices, that is the inbuilt inflation. So for question number 17, option is C. Question number 18. Consider the following statements with reference to the public sector work in India. What if the purpose of public sector in India? That is a question. Providing public utility resources. So is it the responsibility of the government and the public sector to give you access to essential utility resources like say water, transportation, electricity? Definitely. If government doesn't do it, then who will do it? To create social and economic overhead capital. Is it the duty of the public sector, the government, to invest into the human capital, the social capital in the nation? Definitely. To ensure balancing regional and there is some mistake here. To ensure the balance among the regional development. Definitely. The government has to make sure that all the regions of the country are getting developed. Advancing egalitarian goals. Egalitarian goals are things which will lead to reduction in the inequality and increase in the wealth and welfare of the all the people. So welfare of all the people is egalitarian approach. So will the government work for it? Definitely the government would want to reduce the inequalities in the country and work towards the welfare of all the people. So that is also correct. So which of the following statements are correct? All the statements are correct. Coming to question number 19. Statement 1. We have to correct the correct answers. Statement 1 is saying the net domestic product equals to GDP plus depreciation. Statement 2 is about per capita income. Statement 3 is about again net domestic product. Now see the formula in the statement 1. Net domestic product. When we say GDP, it is the gross domestic product, the value of all goods and services produced within a country for a particular period of time. And if we remove the depreciation, that is the wear and tear of all the goods, then we will get the net domestic product. That is why the name net is when from the gross you remove something, then you will get the net amount. So GDP minus depreciation is NDP, not GDP plus depreciation. So formula is wrong. Statement 2, per capita income is net domestic product divided by the total population of the nation. So generally when we say per capita income, we consider the total income by the total population. And generally when we consider total income, it will be GDP. But if you want to go for a more specific one, it will be NDP. But most of the formulas use GDP. But the per capita income, remember, can be calculated using GDP. Then we'll say per capita income as per GDP. When we calculate as per NDP, we'll say per capita income as per NDP. But the question setter here has probably taken a broad view of the GDP, and that is why this statement is wrong, because they are just considering the net domestic product in this case. Probably they have gone with the broad view and taken GDP as the equivalent to total income, to calculate the per capita income formula. So if we go by the broad view, then this becomes wrong because it is considering only the NDP. Then statement number 3, net domestic product is the better metric than the GDP for comparing the world economies. Most of the economies, the GDP will be used to compare. So NDP we cannot say is the better metric to compare the economies of the world. Which of the following statement is correct? None of the statements are correct. Question number 20. Consider the following statements. Statement number 1. Low income countries and lower middle income countries have high prospective growth rates and high marginal productivity of capital. When we say high prospective growth rate, that means that their growth rates are currently low and they can grow tremendously in future. That the growth rate can improve tremendously in the future. And high marginal productivity of capital means, so whatever capital we use there, it can be put for a better utilization. The marginal capital, the additional unit of capital that we put in, it lead to higher efficiency. So the question is saying that low income and lower middle income countries will have high growth perspectives and high marginal capital. While this is true in the general sense, that because I have the lower growth for the low income countries, they have the high potential for higher growth. In the practical world, it doesn't happen like that. Even though they have the higher potential for the growth, generally they won't grow that much because of the structural problems in their economy and because of the lack of proper utilization of the capital, because of the inefficiency in usage of the capital. Due to all of these factors, even though they can grow tremendously, they won't grow that much. So that way the statement will become incorrect if we go by the practical logic. Statement 2 says they should borrow and borrow heavily in order to finance a broad-based increase in investment on human capital, public infrastructure, water sanitation, and environmental protection. So here, if we go by the technical word, borrow and borrow heavily, then it becomes wrong. But if we say that various economists have suggested the lower income countries to borrow an investment into the human capital, public infrastructure, and water and sanitation so that they can develop, that perspective will be true. But we will go by the statement literally, and they have said that borrow and borrow heavily in order to improve the human capital, public infrastructure. If the borrowed amount is not utilized properly, then it will lead to further problems in the economy. So that way, this statement also will become incorrect. So this question, it will be different from your key answer because of the different approaches in the thinking. So both statement 1 and 2 are incorrect according to me. Question number 21. With reference to the secondary sector, consider the following statements. The secondary sector predominantly involves activities like processing, manufacturing, and products from the natural resources. The primary sector is concerned with the agriculture, secondary sector is considered with the manufacturing, and also in changing the primary agriculture products into some form or market by value addition. And the tertiary sector will be involved with the service sector. So the statement 1 is talking about the manufacturing sector and secondary sector. That is correct. Construction is considered a part of the secondary sector. Definitely construction is part of the secondary sector. This sector includes activities such as automobile production and shipbuilding. All these are manufacturing related activities. So this is also correct. So how many of the above statements are correct? All of the above statements are correct. Question number 22. Consider the following statements with reference to the priority sector lending certificates. So the Reserve Bank of India has put various priority sector lending norms on the banks. So as per that, every bank has to give certain percentage of their loans to the priority sectors. And the list of the priority sector will be given by the Reserve Bank of India. With this background, so the priority sector lending certificates, they are tradables certificates issued against the priority sector lending loans of banks. So this statement is saying that if say SBI, one bank, has achieved more than their priority sector norms and they have done more priority sector lending, they can convert these loans into certificate and sell it to some other bank, say HDFC, who has not met these norms, so that HDFC can fulfill these norms. That is true, banks can do that. Statement 2 is saying only scheduled commercial banks are eligible to participate in the trading of priority sector lending on the eKuber platform. So in order to trade the priority sector lending certificates, the RBI will do it on the eKuber platform. And the question is saying that only scheduled commercial banks are eligible. That is wrong. Even the other RRBs and the cooperatives who are all mandated to do the priority sector lending, all of them can go and trade on the eKuber platform. So this statement will become wrong. So which of the statements given above are correct? It is only one which is correct. So for question number 22, correct option is answer A. Question number 23. When the central bank increases the cash reserve ratio, it leads to what? How many of the above statements are correct? The cash reserve ratio is a percentage of net demand and time liabilities which a bank has to maintain with the RBI. The bank won't get any interest on it, but if the bank fails to keep the cash reserve ratio, RBI will impose a penalty on it. So if the central bank, that is the RBI, increases the percentage of cash reserve ratio, so the RBI is saying that banks have to keep more money in the form of cash reserve ratio. What will happen? It will lead to fall in the money circulation. Now, because the banks have to keep more money aside, whatever the loans that they are giving, it will be reduced by that much of amount. So ultimately, the money supply will increase. So it will lead to fall in the money circulation. So this statement is correct. Low demand for goods and services. Now, because of the increase in reserve requirements, less and less funds will be available for the loans, and people will be able to borrow less. And because people borrowed less, they have less amount with them. Because they have less amount with them, the demand for goods and services will fall. So this is also correct. Rise in the purchasing power of people. It will reduce the, like we just discussed about how increase in the reserve requirements will reduce the money supply in the economy, and ultimately no demand and no inflation. So it won't have any immediate impact on the purchasing power, but in fact it will impact the investment and lending and the economic activities. So it will impact the employments negatively, and ultimately if people get less income, their purchasing power will reduce. So this statement is incorrect. Rise in the bank's lending capacity. No, if the bank is putting away more funds in the form of reserves, it will have less funds available with it for lending. So it will in fact reduce the bank's lending capacity. So this statement is also incorrect. How many of the above statements are correct? Two statements are correct for question number 23. Question number 24. The difference between a bank and an NBFI, non-banking financial institution, is that a bank directly interacts with the customers, while an NBFI interacts with banks and governments. Even the non-banking financial institution, they also directly interact with the customer. Think of something like the Cholamandalam Finance or the Muthoot Finance. All of these are NBFCs, but they also interact with the customers, right? So this is incorrect. A bank indulges in a number of activities relating to finance with a range of customers, while a NBFI is mainly concerned with the term loans needs of the large enterprises. Even the NBFC will deal with the individuals, but to a great extent, if you take the percentage of loans that a NBFC lends to different categories of borrowers, like the large enterprises and the individuals, majority of the loans will be given to the large enterprises. So partially, this statement is correct. We'll keep it on hold. A bank deals with both internal and the international customers, while an NBFC is mainly concerned with the finances of foreign company. There is nothing like NBFCs will be mainly dealing with the foreign companies. They also deal with Indian companies and Indian customers. So this is outright wrong. A bank's minimum interest is to help in the business transactions and savings investment activities, while the NBFI's main interest is in the stabilization of currency. The NBFCs are also into the same business as banking companies. So why would they main business will be the stabilization of currency? The stabilization of currency and the foreign exchange rate, that is a duty of Reserve Bank of India, not the non-banking financial institutions. So this is also outright wrong. So the statement which is partially correct, and because we have to choose the best options among the given options, option B will be the correct option because it is partially correct. Question number 25. Consider the following statements regarding the capital inflow. Foreign investments boost the domestic value. So we have to choose which of the following are correct. If the foreign investments are coming into India, so the foreign investors will try to sell his dollars and he'll demand the Indian rupees so that he can bring in the Indian rupees into India. So the demand for Indian rupees will increase and ultimately the value of Indian rupees will increase as against the dollar. So this statement is correct. Stronger domestic currency raises the export prices and lowers the import costs, affecting the export competitiveness. So if the Indian rupee becomes stronger, what will happen? Now for the American buyer, the Indian rupee is stronger now. So whatever are the exports from India, the exports become less lucrative for the foreign buyer. So it will impact the export. But look at from the point of view of imports. For the imports, now a 1 rupee we can purchase more number of goods for the same rupee because rupee has become stronger. So it will positively affect the imports. So this statement is also correct. Statement 3 which says capital inflows inflate the foreign exchange reserves causing the inflation by expanding the monetary base without increasing the production. When the foreign inflows come in, we cannot necessarily say that it will directly lead to the inflation because the Reserve Bank of India can absorb the inflow of the foreign capital into the country by doing the open market operation or by issuing the market stabilization scheme bonds and trying to absorb the excess foreign exchange and controlling the inflation in the country. So it doesn't necessarily lead to increase in the inflation. So that way this statement is incorrect. So the correct option would be only 2. Your key answer wrongly has the option as all 3. This will be incorrect. The reasoning is wrong in the key answer. The logic that we have discussed is the correct logic. Please make it B only 2. Next, moving on to question number 26. Consider the following statements regarding the capital account of India. The FDI in an unlisted Indian company is always considered under the equity flow of capital account. Statement 2. Investment through non-convertible debentures are classified under the foreign direct investment. 3. Deposits in NRO and FCNR accounts contribute to India's external debt profile. Statement number 1. Foreign direct investment in an unlisted Indian companies will be considered under the equity flow of capital account. So this is correct statement because when we say the FDI, currently FDI can be into both listed companies and the unlisted companies. So in case of listed company, any investment of 10% or more into the paid up capital will be considered as the foreign direct investment. But there is no such criteria for the unlisted companies. Statement number 2. Investment through the non-convertible debentures are classified under the foreign direct investment. When we say non-convertible debentures, they are debt instruments. So can we say that investment in the debt instruments is same as the FDI? No, it is not, because FDI is investment into the ownership and long term, this and investment into the equity of the business. So investment in the form of non convertible debentures, which are necessarily debt instrument, that is not FDI. So statement 2 is incorrect. Deposits in the NRO and the FCNR banking accounts contribute to the India's external debt profile. When we say NRO accounts or the FCNR, the foreign currency non-resident bank accounts, they do not directly contribute to the India's external debt profile. So this statement is also wrong. How many statements are correct? It is only one which is correct. That is the statement number 1. Question number 27. A big source of deficit in the government's budget is the financial subsidy. Reason: the level of financial subsidy is much higher in the Indian agriculture than in the developed countries. The government issues various subsidies to the farmers and to various other people who are in need of support. So a big source of deficit in the government's budget is through the financial subsidy. This is definitely true. And the statement 2 is saying that majority of that subsidy deficit, which is due to the financial subsidy, it is due to the Indian agriculture, and the amount of financial subsidy that the Indian government gives is much higher than the developed countries. This is false, because if we look at the population of India and the number of farmers are India, and if we consider the amount of subsidies that the government gives, it will be in percentage terms less than what a developed country would give to its farmers, even in terms of considering the number of farmers are there and the level of agricultural output that is happening in that particular country. So even though Indian government subsidy is high, it may not be as proportionally high as what a developed country does for their agriculture all the time. So statement 1 is correct, statement 2 is incorrect. Statement 1 is correct, statement 2 is incorrect. So the correct option is option number C for question number 27. Consider the following statements regarding the gift city. The gift city is India's first international financial services center under the special economic zone. India Gift City is indeed the India's first financial center set up under the special economic zone in Gujarat. This provides the world-class financial services only to non-residents to the extent permissible under the currency regulation in a currency other than the domestic currency. Even though in the SEZ sector they deal with the currency other than the domestic currency, the financial services are provided both to the resident and the non-resident. So that is incorrect. GIFT is planned as a greenfield business district to be located between Gandhinagar and the Ahmedabad to cater to the financial services and the IT firms looking to India's operations. So the GIFT is indeed planned as a greenfield business district that is newly set up. So this is also correct. How many of the above statements are correct? Only 2 are correct in this case. Coming to question number 29. Consider the following statements regarding the RBI's card tokenization policy. So when you're paying with your card, earlier there used to happen, the credit card scams used to happen where the credit card number and all of that will be cloned using a skimmer. Skimmer is when they attach a small device to the credit card machine, and when you are swiping it, apart from the credit card machine at the merchant POS taking your data, even the skimmer used to collect your data, and after that using your card details, your CVV number and your expiry date, fraudsters used to take away money from your account. In order to avoid that, only when the merchant has your all the details like the card number and the PIN number and the CVV, he can commit a fraud, right? So what if we can hide this number and replace this number with some random number, and such way the merchant will not know the actual details of your card. So that is the reason RBI came up with the card tokenization. Tokenization is where, in order to increase the security of the credit cards and the debit cards, your actual card number details will be replaced by some other unique codes, alphanumeric numbers, or unique codes, which are known as tokens. That way, the token will be shared with the intermediary and the merchant, and your credit card details will be safe with you. Statement number one. Card tokenization is mandatory for all merchants and card issuers according to the RBI. The card tokenization, currently RBI has made it voluntary on part of the customers if they have to go for tokenization. So if the customer, when you're paying for a tokenization, what will happen is the token will be saved in the merchant's database, and whenever you want to go make a purchase, it will be easy. For example, if you want to purchase something on Amazon today, when you are entering the data for the first time after the card tokenization has taken place, it will ask you for your CVV, your expiry date, your card number, and there will be option choose the card tokenization. If you opt for it, a token number will be generated, and that will be stored with the merchant. And every time you use the card, you don't have to put in all of the details. The token will be used there, and your card details will be safe with you. But if you don't opt for the card tokenization, every time you will have to put in your card number, your CVV, your expiry date, all of it. And currently, RBI has kept it voluntary for the customers to opt in for the tokenization. If you choose to not opt in, you will have to fill in all the details every time. It will be hectic for you. That's all. So saying that mandatory for all the merchant is wrong. A token issued under the RBI's card tokenization policy is device specific. This is indeed true. It is device specific. For each of the devices that you use, there will be a unique token generated. So that is the correct statement. Card issuers cannot refuse to tokenize a card based on their risk assessment. As of now, if the card issuer feels that by tokenizing a certain card, your card will be put under more risk, they can not tokenize your card so that you will be protected. So RBI has given the freedom for the card issuers in particular cases where they have a specific set of policy. If a particular card tokenization can lead to more risky nature, more risk for the particular card or the transaction, then they can refuse actually. So cannot refuse is the wrong answer. How many of the above statements are correct? Only one is correct. If there is a different answer in your given answer key, please make a change to it. Okay. Question number 30. Which of the following is not included in the revenue account of the union budget? So we have to look at the revenue account of the union budget and see which of the following are not included. So when we say revenue, it is the dealings of the particular financial year and not the capital in nature. So interest receipts, they are related to a particular financial year. The tax receipt, they are particular related to a particular financial year. The profits and dividends of the government department undertakings and public sector undertakings, they are also coming to the government every year and revenue in nature. But small savings is the odd one out here, because whatever are the small savings which people deposit with the government and with the post office, it will go to the public account of India. So it is a liability which the government have to pay back to the people. It doesn't go to the revenue account of the fiscal policies budget. So D is the odd one out. Coming to question number 31. Consider the following statements regarding the GDP deflator and the consumer price index. Both the GDP deflator and the consumer price index include the imported goods in their calculation. Now both of the GDP deflator and the consumer price index, they try to measure the price changes in the economy. They try to capture how much is the inflation happening, where the consumer price index will capture the inflation at the retail level of all the goods and services consumed by the consumers. The wholesale price index will capture it at the producer level for all the goods produced. So here we note there are no services considered. The GDP deflator will calculate for all the goods and services produced at the economy, overall economy level. So now it is saying that both the GDP deflator and the consumer price index, they calculate the value of imported goods. In the GDP deflator part, it is only about the goods and services produced within the borders of the economy. So the imported goods are not considered, whereas the CPI will consider that. So this statement is incorrect. Statement 2, the basket of goods for the GDP deflator changes over time, whereas CPI uses a fixed basket of goods. So every year the goods produced in the country can change. Some year we might produce more goods, some year we might produce less goods, different kinds of goods. So what is included in the GDP calculation, that can change. But CPI has a fixed criteria, has fixed wastage. It will be calculated on a particular basket of goods and services. And true, this basket of goods and services will be revised after a particular point of time, say in 10 years or 15 years or 20 years. So they will try to sync it with whatever are the consumers' tastes and preferences. But for that much period of time, whatever are the goods included, that will be fixed. The weightages will be fixed. So CPI actually uses a fixed basket of goods. This is correct. The GDP deflator's basket of goods changes over time. This is also correct. So option 2 is correct. So they are asking for the incorrect statement. So incorrect is just option 1. So A is the correct answer for question number 31. Question number 32. What is the primary goal of the Business Reform Action Plan? The DPIIT, Department for Promotion of Industry and Industrial Trade, under the Ministry of Commerce, they came up with a scheme so that they can improve the ease of doing business across the country by improving various reforms, improving the efficiency, so that ultimately the India's position in the world's ease of doing business will increase. So that is the primary goal of the BRAP Reform Action Plan. And let us look at the options. To limit the foreign investment in India. Will any plan of action will try to limit the foreign investment in India? No. To directly compete the China's manufacturing sector. It is not to compete with China or some other country's manufacturing sector. The first option here, when they say self-reliant economic strategy, the self-reliance is based on Make in India, Atmanirbhar Bharat, all of that. But it is not related to BRAP. Option C, to improve India's ranking in the World Bank's ease of doing business. So this is correct. The main purpose of business reform was to increase the efficiency in the businesses and bring in reforms in the economy so that we get a better ranking in the World Bank's ease of doing business report. This is correct. We'll keep it on hold. Option D, to exclusively support the growth of small and medium enterprises without focusing on larger corporations. This is not to work about the MSMEs, so this is also wrong. So option C is the correct answer. Let's move on to question number 33. Which of the following generally are known as twin deficits? The twin, we have a something called twin deficit hypothesis. This twin deficit hypothesis says that there is a strong link between the country's current account deficit and its fiscal deficit. Because if the tax revenues are low and the lower tax revenues, they can lead to increased borrowings from the abroad, which will ultimately lead to a higher current account deficit. So that is why the current account deficit and the fiscal deficit are linked together. So which of the following contain that option? Revenue and current, no. Revenue and capital, no. Fiscal deficit and current account deficit. So this is correct. Fiscal deficit and capital deficit, this is wrong. So fiscal deficit and the current account deficit are the twin deficits. Question number 34. The Zero Trust Authentication ZTA adopted by the Center for Secure Email Systems work primarily on which principle? The central government came up with a security system called the Zero Trust Authentication System for all the emails. And the question is asking it works on which system. Look at the name, zero trust authentication. Trust but verify, trust and forget. Trust is not necessary, never trust, always verify. So it is based on the principle of never trust, always verify. That means whatever is the email we are getting, whether it is from a known person or an unknown person, never trust any email. It can have any virus or Trojan horse in it. So never trust any email, even though it is coming from known parties. Always verify. So that is the concept behind the zero trust authentication principle of the security system. Question number 35. Consider the following statements. In 1960s, Government of India under the Food and Agriculture Minister Chidambaram launched the Green Revolution with the help of MS Swaminathan. Okay, this is correct. During the Green Revolution, high-yielding varieties of dwarf rice seeds, namely Lerma Rojo 64 and Sonara 64, were introduced in India and which were imported from Japan. So even though during the Green Revolution we came up with certain high-yielding varieties of rice and wheat, the options that are given here about the Rojo and Sonara, they are wrong. For example, for the rice, the most famous high yielding variety of the rice that we went for, that is the IR8, and it was developed by a rice research institute which was located in Philippines. So it was not imported from Japan. So the second question is statement is incorrect. We have to select the correct answer. It will be option C because statement 1 is correct, statement 2 is incorrect. Question number 36. Which of the following statements best describe the concept of total expense ratio in the mutual funds? In the mutual funds, the total expense ratio is total expenses of the mutual funds divided by the average assets under management. Assets under management is what is the amount of the funds that the mutual fund is managing. So this gives us the total expense ratio. And this total expense ratio includes various administration on managing and operating costs of the mutual funds. It will include various administrative cost, distribution cost, management fees, operational expenses. So when the return on the mutual fund is coming, they'll remove the expense ratio, whatever are the expenses incurred, and then they will credit the remaining amount to your account. If a particular mutual fund has a high total expense ratio, that means that they are going to deduct more for the expenses. If some fund has a less TR, that means they are going to deduct less for the operation and administrative expenses of the fund. Now let us look at the statements. It is a total return on investment? No. It is a percentage of funds assets paid for the operating expenses and the management fees. Yes, this is correct. Let us keep it on hold. It is a ratio of total profits to the total losses. No, it is a ratio of total expenses to the assets under management. So this is also wrong. It is a ratio of total capital investment to the total assets of the mutual fund. This is also wrong. So the correct option is option number B. Question number 37. With reference to the gross capital formation and savings, consider the following statements. Gross capital formation is part of a country's total expenditure which is consumed and not added to the nation's fixed tangible assets and stocks. When we say gross capital formation, out of a current year's earning, how much are we putting into capital assets and into the changes in the inventories? Capital assets like land, building, machinery, and all of this. All of this will lead to capital expenditure and ultimately it will lead to production of more goods and services in the future because of the increased productive capacity of the economy and it will lead to the overall growth in the future. So statement 1 is saying that gross capital formation is the part of the country's total expenditure which is consumed and not added to the nation's expenditure. Nation's fixed tangible assets. No, it is not the part which is consumed, but which the part which is actually added to the nation's fixed tangible assets. So this is incorrect. For a closed economy, savings equals capital formation plus net capital inflow from the abroad. When we say a closed economy, that means there are no dealings with the external sector, there are no inflows and outflows happening from the external sector. So when the economy is closed economy, how can the capital inflows happen? This also doesn't make sense. So that is also incorrect. Which of the following statements given above are in, see again the question is asking about incorrect. So the incorrect statements are both 1 and 2 because both are incorrect. Option C is the correct answer. Question 38. With reference to the concept of windfall taxes, consider the following statements. When we say windfall taxes, these are some taxes which the government imposes on an entity or a business when there is some high income which is happening because of some external factor. Say if the company is performing well and if it gains some income, will the government impose higher taxes on it? No. Windfall taxes will be imposed on windfall gains. And what are windfall gains? These which do not occur in the normal course of action, but which occur due to some sudden thing happening. And that sudden thing will lead to the high income and high profit of that particular organization. So government is like, why can't I invest some tax on that windfall gain? And that tax will be known as windfall tax. So that gain which is not happening in the normal course of business, but due to some external thing happening or due to the impact of some external factor, we will get high profits. And on that high profit, the government will impose a tax called windfall tax. Once in a while, whenever the prices of the crude oil increases in the global market, the oil marketing companies in India, they make tremendous profit. And here the profits are made not because of improvement in their business skills or profit, but because of some external factor happening. That is the fall in the crude oil prices. So in that case, government will impose the windfall gains tax on this crude oil companies, and after some time again they will remove it. Again, when the prices of crude oil in the global level falls tremendously, these companies will making higher profits. It is not because of their skills, but because of some external event happening. Again, the government will impose the windfall tax. Again, after some time they will remove it. So this cat and mouse game keeps happening. Now let us look at the statements. Windfall taxes are assigned to the profits of a company gains from an internal or predictable event. Now, is it due to the oil marketing company coming up with a better technology or production and earning profit? No. The normal profits are normally anyway taxed. The windfall tax are because of some external event or unpredictable event happening. So this is incorrect. The concept of windfall profit taxes is applicable on the domestic crude oil production. The generally the government does impose the windfall taxes on the domestic crude oil production, but it is not limited to only on the domestic crude oil production. It is, say for example, the exports of gasoline or the exports of diesel and aviation fuel on the private refineries who wants to sell their fuel overseas to gain from the refining margins. So government imposes windfall taxes on all of this. So this is also incorrect. Which of the statements given are correct? Both are incorrect. So answer is neither one nor two. Consider the following statements regarding the TOT model, toll operate transfer model. So what will happen in the TOT model? There will be some asset which is already there, which is already built. Say for example, a road is already built. The infrastructure project is complete. Now the government will lease this asset to the private company for a one-time fees. Maybe it can be through bidding. So once the private company pays this one-time fee, it will be given the access to this asset for a particular period of time, and this company, private company which has leased this road, it can collect the toll for a particular period of time, and the toll rates will be fixed by the highways authority. and after the fixed time the property will go back to the government. So that is why if you see the name toll, operate, transfer, the asset will be leased by the private company. Say the road will be leased by the private company for say 10 years. So they will collect the toll for 10 years, and during these 10 years they have to manage it, they have to operate it, and after the period of 10 years they have to transfer the asset again to the government. This is the TOT model. The TOT model aims to limit the private sector involvement in the highway sector. No, it doesn't aim to limit the private sector. In fact, it will lease the assets to the private sector so that they can collect the lease for a particular period of time and then transfer it back to the government. So this statement is outright wrong. The TOT involves leasing operational national highway projects to the private parties for long term with an upfront fee. This is correct. The TOT operators charge user fee, that is the toll, and handle maintenance during the concession period as per the National Highway Authorities of India rates. So this is also correct. How many of the above statements are correct? First statement was incorrect, two are correct. So only two is the correct answer. Moving on to question number 40. Consider the following statements. The reserve deposit ratio is the proportion of total deposits that the commercial banks keep as reserves. So the RBI will prescribe the statutory reserve requirements like the CRR or the SLR. So both of these are the reserve deposit ratios, statutory requirements. So the question is saying that the reserve deposit ratio is the proportion of total deposits that the banks keep as a reserve. True. A lower reserve requirement allows the banks to lend more money at lower rates, making the borrowing more attractive to customer. So if the RBI reduces, say for example, the CRR, now more funds are available with the banks. Banks can give more monies to people at lower interest rate, and ultimately more borrowing will happen. So this statement is also correct. But is the statement right reason for the which we have to select which of the following are correct? And we have assertion and reason. Even though both the statements are correct, the statement 2 is not the right assertion. They are just talking about the impact of what will happen if the reserve is reduced, but it doesn't talk anything about the definition. So we can say that it is not the correct explanation. Even though both the statements are correct, it is not the correct explanation. So option B is the correct answer. Question 41. Coastal Gujarat has been called as an industrial workshop. It is reason it is dotted with manufacturing units of textiles, garments, pharma, and petrochemicals. So the coastal Gujarat is indeed known as the industrial workshop because of various kinds of industries which are there. And point number one, it is near the coast, so import export it is very easy for the shipping. And point number two, because of the oil drilling companies which are there off coast, so the petroleum companies are there, and there are garment companies, pharma companies, petrochemical companies, and that is why it is known as the industrial workshop. So both statements are correct, and this is the correct reason for the assertion. So both A and B, A and assertion and reason are true, and the reason is the correct explanation for the assertion. The answer is A for question number 41. Now moving on to question number 42. Which of the following are key indicators of poverty in India? The question is asking us which among the following will show the indication of poverty in India. High infant mortality rate. So if the infants are dying early, if the more number of infants are dying at the very infancy, it does show poverty, right? Because why will the infants die? Whether it is because of low nutrition or no better health care, or the pregnant mother, she was weak and the kid is also born very weak. Again, it will come to nutritional level, or it will come to poverty where the food is not proper, nutrition is not given to the infant, and the hospitalization cost or the healthcare is not provided to the infant. So all of these are linked to poverty. So this fact is correct. Low life expectancy. So if some country has low life expectancy, what will be the reason? The low life expectancy indicates poverty because of poor living conditions, you don't have proper education, sorry, proper health care, or you have malnutrition, or you don't have proper food. So all this will have the ultimate impact on the life expectancy. And if poverty is there, low life expectancy would also be there. So it is also an indicator. High inflation rate. Poverty and inflation rate are not directly related. Inflation can affect both rich people and poor people. The level of impact it has on the rich people is less and on the poor people is more. But inflation affects both rich and poor. It is not directly related to poverty. So this is incorrect. Low literacy rate. Again, if poverty is there, the person will not have enough money to afford himself a good education in a good school. So that is also an indicator. So we have to select, I think, the correct codes. So we have to remove 3 and 1 to 4 is the answer. So B is the correct answer for question number 42. Question number 43. The poverty line estimation in India has been based on the consumption expenditure and not on the income levels. It is difficult to assess the income of a self-employed person, daily wage laborer, etc. because there may be large fluctuations in the income due to seasonal factors. We have to select the codes and the reason and the assertion. Poverty line estimation in India has been based on the consumption expenditure and not on the income level. This is true because consumption patterns are more stable and they are easier to compare as compared to income. And because of the consumption, the standard of living can be measured based on how many goods are purchased, what kind of goods are purchased, whether they are spending more on food, whether they are spending more on health and education, and all of this. So, this is in fact correct. It is difficult to assess the incomes of self employed people, daily wage laborers, because these are all in the informal sector. They are not in the mainstream. There is no exact data to collect the data from all of them. And in fact, somebody can hide their income and not show the income properly. So, this is also the correct statement. And in fact, the explanation is correct for the statement, and both 1 and 2 are correct. And statement 1 is the correct explanation of statement 2. Moving on to question number 44. The input subsidies in India, such as on the fertilizer, fall under the indirect subsidies. Fertilizer subsidies are indirect subsidies because, unlike the direct cash transfer, which is happening to the farmer's bank account, say in case of the PM Kisan Yojana, it's not happening in the indirect subsidies. This is the example of direct subsidy. But under the fertilizer subsidy, the farmer will go to the person who is selling the fertilizers. Ultimately, the government will subsidize the fertilizer company so that the fertilizer company will give at a lower cost to this retailer and retailer will sell to the farmer. So indirectly, the farmer is getting the benefit. The farmer is not getting any direct cash to purchase the subsidy for the fertilizer here. So this is correct because fertilizer subsidy is indirect subsidy. Then statement 2, reduction in power and irrigation bills offered to farmers fall under the direct farm subsidies. If there is any reduction in the bill of the farmers when it comes to the power bills or the electricity bills, again the farmer is indirectly getting affected. So it is not under direct subsidies but it is under indirect subsidies. So this is incorrect. The agricultural provisions of the WTO, World Trade Organization, through allow the direct farm subsidies, prohibit the indirect subsidies. The WTO doesn't say that we'll allow the direct subsidies or prohibit the indirect subsidy. The WTO will categorize it into permissible subsidies, which are also known as non-trade distorting and trade distorting subsidies. So they will categorize that way, and there is no outright prohibition on all forms of indirect subsidies as such. So this is also incorrect. All subsidies provided by the government of India fall under indirect subsidies. We just discussed the example of the PM Kisan scheme where there is direct cash transfer happening, and that is an example of direct subsidies. So all the subsidies of government are not indirect subsidies. So this is also incorrect. How many of the statements are correct? One statement is correct. So only one is the answer here. Question number 45. In which of the following city is the headquarter of the Food and Agriculture Organization situated? The FAO is a specialized organization of the United Nations and it works to reduce the world hunger. It will work in both the developed countries and in the developed countries, and it is a forum where all the nations will meet and negotiate and debate about the policies, and they'll also give various policies and suggestions to improve the agriculture sector, forestry sector, the fisheries, so that ultimately good food and nutrition and food security for all is provided. That is the basic objective of FAO. And where is the headquarters of FAO located? It is in Rome. So option is D. Question number 46. Consider the following statements. Cyclical unemployment is a situation associated with the fluctuations in the business cycle and occurs during the economic downturns. So, in different types of unemployment, we have one type of unemployment, that is the cyclical unemployment. So, this unemployment is based on the business cycles, the boom, recession. So, when there is a recession, there will be more unemployment happening. When there is a boom, the economy growth will be happening and more people will be getting jobs because the production of goods and services will be more and they would require more people to work in the economy. So during the booms, more people will be working. So this says that cyclical unemployment is associated with the fluctuations in the business cycle. Yes, it is associated with the fluctuations in the business cycle, and the cyclical unemployment occurs during the economic downturn whenever the economy is performing badly. That is true. Next, the cyclical nature of this type of unemployment means that it tends to rise during the economic downturn and falls during the economic upturn. This statement is saying that the cyclical unemployment, it will fall during whenever the economy is performing better. So the unemployment will fall because more people will get the jobs, and it will rise during the economic downturn. That is, the unemployment will rise during the economy is performing badly because more people will lose their jobs. So this is also correct, and the reason is correct for the assertion. So option is A for question number 46. Consider the following statements regarding the Nidhi companies in India. Nidhi companies are a type of mutual benefit society notified by the central government. So the central government came up with the concept of Nidhi companies in the Companies Act of 2030. So Nidhi company is a type of non-banking financial companies, and the main purpose of them is to promote the savings among people so that the habit of thrift is promoted, and it is members only. So other people are not given the access of the Nidhi companies, and because it was set up under the Companies Act of 2013, it is regulated by the Ministry of Corporate Affairs. Let us look at the statements now. Nidhi companies are a type of companies which are open for the mutual benefit of society notified by the central government. So this is correct. They are created to discourage the habit of thrift and savings among the members. They are created to encourage the habit, not discourage the habit. So this is incorrect. Nidhi companies are regulated by the Ministry of Corporate Affairs. Like I said, because it was set up under the Companies Act of 2013 and the companies are governed by the Ministry of Corporate Affairs. So even for the Nidhi companies, the regulatory body was made as the Ministry of Corporate Affairs. Understand the logic. So this statement is also correct. How many of the above statements are correct? Two statements are correct. So option is option B for question number 47. Consider the following statements regarding the social stock exchange. Now, what is a social stock exchange? In the stock exchange, the BSE and the NSE, the for-profit companies who are the listed companies, they raise their funds for their business needs, the equity or the debt and all of this. A social stock exchange is a place where whether the non-profit organization or the profit organization, they will raise the money only for those causes which are the social causes. It cannot be for some other motive, but only for the motive of social service. So it can either be a non-profit company or a profit company, and there are various listed social activity that the company can involve themselves into, and only for those purposes the money can be raised, and such stock exchange is the social stock exchange. Now statement 1 says only for profit not for profit organizations can list themselves here. No, even non for profit organizations who are working in the social sector can list here and raise the money for the social schemes. So this is incorrect. To be recognized as a social enterprise, the organizations need to demonstrate that 67%, that is majority of their activities, are targeted towards the underserved and the less privileged population segment. This is also a condition given for the social stock exchange. The political and religious organizations are eligible to be identified as social enterprises in the social stock exchanges. The political and religious organizations, they are explicitly excluded. They are not eligible, they are excluded from recognized as the social enterprises in the social stock exchanges. So this is also incorrect. The question is asking how many statements are correct. Only the option 2 was correct. So correct number of statements is one statement. So option A is the correct answer for question number 48. Question number 49. With reference to the production taxes and the subsidies, consider the following statements. The production taxes are often imposed regardless of the volume of actual production. When we say production taxes, it is not imposed on the per unit of production, but on the overall production, say at the factory level. Instead of at the product level, it is imposed at the factory level. So if I say the tax on the land revenue or the tax on the entire factory. So here we are not going for the tax about one particular product which is produced in the company, but overall the production capacity. So those are production taxes, and this statement is correct because they are imposed regardless of the volume of actual production. Whether you produce 0 units, whether you produce 100 units or 1 million units, those taxes will be same because they don't care about the volume of production. Product taxes. Now product taxes are imposed on the individual products, are imposed on the producers but are ultimately borne by the consumers. Okay. So when we say product taxes, say for the example of GST. Now GST will be imposed on a particular product. Here the question is saying that it will be imposed on the producer, but ultimately who will bear the impact of this GST? It is the customer who will bear the impact of this GST. So that is correct. Production subsidies are dependent on the volume of actual production. So here the statement is saying that when the government is giving subsidy to a manufacturing firm, they are saying that it will be dependent on the volume of actual production. Not necessarily. The government can say and give a grant to a particular manufacturing entity whether they produce 100 units or 1000 units. Say the government is giving manufacture to a candle producing unit. The government will not put any restriction that you have to produce only 1 lakh candles, only then I'll give the subsidy. The government can give the subsidy because the person is producing candle. It is for producing candle and not for producing 1 lakh candles. So it can be either condition. We cannot say that it will always be dependent on the volume of production. Or to take say for some other example, if the government is giving some subsidy for the solar power plant. Here the government is giving you subsidy because you are putting the solar power plant and not because of say after putting the solar power plant you have to generate X amount of units of solar energy. That is not the condition, right? The government is giving you the amount, the subsidy, because you are putting the solar plant. So this statement is incorrect. And how many of the statements are correct? The first one and second one, only two are correct. And the answer is B for question number 49. Question number 50. Consider the following statements regarding the circular flow of income with the financial market. In the two sector model, households spend all their incomes on the goods and services without any savings. When we say two sector model in the economy or the two factor model in the economy, we assume that there are only two factors in the economy. One is the households and the other is the businesses. So here the households will give the factors of production like the land, building, capital, organization to the business for the business to produce, and the business will produce the goods and services and give to the households. And because they are giving goods and services, the households will make the expenditure here. So basically it starts with the households providing the factors of production and the business in turn returning it with the factor incomes. So once the households get the factor incomes, they will spend it with the businesses to procure the goods and services. So this is the logical flow of two sector model. And here in this model, we assume that there are no savings by the household. Whatever the households get as the factor income, the entire thing they will spend it as expenditure on procuring the goods and services. So statement 1 is exactly talking about that. In a two sector model, the households spend all their income on the goods and services without any savings. So that is correct. Leakages are the amounts added to the flow of income in the form of savings by the households, tax payments, or spending on import. So from this economy, if I remove the taxes, if the household removes the savings, instead of spending all the amount, if it takes away a certain amount and put it in the form of savings. So now what is happening? From the overall economy, certain amount is coming aside in the form of savings. Say if the government takes away some portion as the taxes, what is happening? Instead of the money getting circulated here, certain part is getting leaked from the overall capital flow or money flow in the economy. So those are the leakages from the economy. It can be savings, it can be tax taken by the government. So here the question is saying that leakages are the amounts added to the flow of income in the form of savings by households and tax. It is not the amount that is added, but in fact the amount that is going out. So added is the incorrect option here. Coming to statement number 3. Injections to the circular flow could be in the form of investment, government spending, or subsidy or export. So just like there are leakages, there can be certain injections where the funds can come into the economy, and that can be in the form of investment. So that way the money supply will increase here, and it can be government spending, it can be subsidiary or subsidies given by the government. So all of these are in the form of injections wherein the money flow is coming into the circular flow of economy. So this is correct. How many of the above statements are correct? Two statements were correct. So option is only B for question number 50.